Hello, my fans and family alike. This is your girl, Harley Quinn, and a cat who cannot catch the coronavirus because cats cannot catch the coronavirus, and I have my gloves off because the animals, they're immune to it. What are you doing? Trying to ruin my video? Okay, you're the star of the show? I don't think so, but today we're gonna read a book. A very short story from a book because I'm not reading the entire thing. This is from one of my favorites, creepy little bedtime stories. I love creepy little bedtime stories. Can you stop it? Can you see this guy? What are you thinking? Come on, Bruce. Anyways. Let's go to the back of this book because it's one of my favorite stories. It's very heartwarming. What are you doing? Brucey, get out of my way. Well, can I help you? Can I help you? Okay, let's get to the story. Let's get to the story. Edgar, the Invisible Kid. Edgar was not really invisible, not at first at least. See, he wasn't invisible once. It happened quite slowly. Like a good stew or a pot roast, delicious, he needed a while to simmer before he became 100% absolutely, positively invisible. Edgar was given as a small child to the richest people in town. Lots of money. Remind you of someone? Bruce Wayne? The Franks. But all the wealth in the world could not make them a likable family. Very true. The father of the clan was a stern, angry businessman. I said that wrong. It says a stern, aging businessman. You see him? He's old and ugly. And he had spent a majority of his years in the stock market. Sounds boring. Buying and selling, trying and yelling. 5 days a week except on weekends when he would worry about work while chewing on his cigar and reading the newspaper. Sounds very boring. The mother that followed was a perfect businessman's wife. She knew the appropriate time and place for everything. Keeping up appearances was her goal in life, although behind closed doors, she was a bitter and petty woman. Not a good person to be. Obsessed only with money and her dying beauty. Dying beauty. She's not pretty anymore, and the ugliness on the inside, this is just me going on a rant, is showing on the outside. So be kind. And yes, Harley Quinn just said that. Be kind. This appropriate couple had created 2 children of their very own, twins to be precise. 2 of the loveliest angels. Long, flowing blonde locks framed their crystal blue eyes, which captured the onlooker in a hypnotic state. Kind of like when you have me doing my thing when I used to be a doctor, but alas, those days are over. Unfortunately, their outer beauty did not match the ugliness that they had inside of them. Their years of primping had made them shallow. And since their parents had always given them everything they wanted, they became selfish, spoiled brats. Lame. Blaming everything on other people and crying at the very mention of the word no. Boo-hoo, I can't get what I want. Well, this is what they're supposed to look like. They got evil little faces and curly little hairs. They were very hard to get along with, but since they had each other, because they were twins, they had very little purpose for anyone else. They shared a deep connection which enabled them to speak to each other in thought. This was very unnerving for anyone present, for it was never known if something awful was being said about the third party without them knowing it. That's entirely spooky, okay? Very creepy. Kind of like a superpower, but like a super evil power. Edgar thought they were freaky. Same, Edgar, same. He thought the whole family was freaky. Let me get closer. The morning he had first met Mrs. Frunk, Edgar's mother had been crying. She had no money and could not afford to feed Edgar, much less herself. She had met a woman, Mrs. Frunk, who had panicked in a park in the good part of town. Who was picnicking in a park in a good part of town. There's gonna be no cutouts here. If I mess up, I mess up. It happens when you read sometimes. It's just a lot. So she was picnicking, not panicking. And, well, Mrs. Frunk was a stern and uncaring woman. She told Edgar's mother that she would only give her food in exchange for Edgar. I don't like that. I don't like that business deal. She had been unsuccessful in giving her husband a son and knew that Mr. Frunk would very much enjoy getting one for his birthday present. Talk about weirdos. Edgar's mother was a very good mother and knew that she could not feed and take care of him as well as this wealthy woman. It broke her heart to give him up, but understood that it was best for Edgar. She agreed, and Mrs. Frunk took Edgar away, crying. See, they're crying. So sad. Next page. Edgar had to hide for 2 days in Mrs. Frunk's closet to avoid ruining Mr. Frunk's birthday surprise. They kept a kid in a closet for 2 days? That's horrible! Mrs. Frunk brought him enormous meals with special desserts like cheesecake and apple fritters. Edgar ate every morsel as if he had not eaten in days, which he had not. He's stuck in a closet and his mom didn't have any money to really feed him. But that's not her fault. She just had a bad circumstance. Anyways, I should get some water, so I will be right back. Stay there. I had apple juice instead. Okay, back to our story. Sorry. Where was I? Okay. Mrs. Frunk said, "My dear boy, we must get you fattened up in time for Mr. Frunk's party. We can't have him opening up his present only to find a skeleton inside. That'd be very Halloweeny." Edgar thought the large meals were heavenly, but when he was finished, Mrs. Frunk would turn out the light and close the closet door. It would be so dark that Edgar couldn't even see his own hand. He would cry and dream of his mother, his real mother. Reading is hard work. Need a drink again. This is apple juice. On Mr. Frunk's birthday, Edgar was put in a box, which was wrapped in handmade Italian paper and tied with a blue silk ribbon. Mr. Frunk was much too busy to open his presents immediately and insisted on eating his special birthday dinner and cake first. Edgar waited patiently, not even moving a muscle when his nose itched. He's stuck in a box. It's pretty messed up. Finally, after eating every crumb on the table, Mr. Frunk sat back in the chair, burped, and announced that he would now receive his presents. He got a new silk power tie, an expensive watch, 3 cigars from Cuba, and a gold-plated pocket calendar. Okay, you fancy, huh? At last, Mrs. Frunk announced that she had saved the best for last. She laid the fancy blue ribbon-tied package in front of Mr. Frunk. He hummed and hawed about the best way to open his present until he opted to just rip it open. When he opened the lid, he started staring in long silence and sat back in the chair. "It's a new son, honey," Mrs. Frunk squeaked. "I knew you always wanted one." Mr. Frunk cleared his throat. "Thank you, Bunny. Tell me, son, what's 31 times 17, he barked at Edgar in a rough and gravelly voice. I don't know, sir, Edgar managed to cry out. This infuriated Mr. Frunk. What do you mean you don't know? What grade are you in? Are you stupid or something? Answer me, boy. Speak up. Rude. I'm not in any grade, sir, Edgar replied. His mother had tried to enroll him in school, but since she could not afford tuition, books, or school clothes, no school would accept him. Well, tomorrow, this is the father now. Well, tomorrow you go to school. A boy must know things like what 31 times 17 is. Now go to bed, Mr. Frunk yelled. He was already disappointed in his new son. What a jerk. Meanwhile, the twins sat in utter amazement. Look at those little jerks. They're mean. They had not agreed to this new addition to their family, and they did not approve. Worst of all, Edgar was cute. They had always been the cute ones in the family, and this was very much a threat to them. Father worked all the time, so they barely got to spend any time with him as it was. They loved it when Father got home from work. He would set them on his lap, give them money and toys, and then send them on their way. Did this mean that Edgar would get the toys and money now, they thought, because that's all that matters to them, supposedly, but it's not. There's more to life than money and material possessions. Anyways, let's move forward. They silently made a pact with each other to make Edgar's life with the Frunks as miserable as possible. Because they're meanies. Edgar went to his room. Although at first he thought his room was in Mrs. Frunk's closet, he was quickly redirected to a small room behind the kitchen. It had no windows, but the ceiling had a crack in it that revealed light coming from Mr. and Mrs. Frunk's upstairs bedroom. What are you doing, cat? Brucey, come on, headbutting me. It was cold, and Edgar longed for the warm embrace of his mother, his real mother. The next morning, Mr. Frunk abruptly interrupted Edgar's dream by charging into his room at 4 a.m. That is so bonkers, that's early. He was having a delicious dream about flying in the flowing fabrics of his mother's apron while she sang his favorite lullaby to him. The wind whistled in time to her song and lifted him higher and higher until he circled her head so fast that he appeared as a glowing halo shining. That was just a cough. Don't be worried about me. As a glowing halo shining light upon an angel's brow. The next day he was given new school clothes, even though the Frunks were very displeased with him. Excuse me. The clothes were too big and very scratchy. Edgar hated wearing them. It was as if he were wearing clothes that belonged to someone else. His new duds did not change the way the other school children felt about him. They still stared and made faces and shot spitballs at his head. The twins still called him names and blamed accidents on him. The teacher would not even say his name at roll call and would never let him ask any questions. Get your claws off of me. The cat is down here just trying to claw at my suit. Later, at supper time, nobody called for Edgar to come eat. When he left his room to see what the delicious smells were, he noticed that the dining room table was only set for 4, and exactly 4 family members were stuffing their faces. Edgar went back to his room, hungry again. It's really not very nice way to treat someone. That marked the beginning of Edgar's invisibility. He would sneak into the kitchen when the others had gone to bed. There were never any leftovers, but Edgar was quite content eating cold cereal or a piece of fresh fruit. It was all delicious to him, and it kept his tummy from growling so he could get some sleep. See, he's looking in that fridge for something to eat. Horrible, just horrible. He felt guilty taking food without asking. He had not been made to feel like he was welcome part of the Frunk's household. He felt more like a mouse, just like the twins had called him. But as long as he was out of sight, the Frunks would not scold him, and Edgar realized that only he could take care of himself. Oh my gosh, Cat. The next morning, nobody woke Edgar for school. He woke up late. He threw on his scratchy clothes and ran all the way there. His teacher did not even look up when he entered the classroom. None of the students turned to stare and throw spitballs at him. The twins didn't call him names during recess. It was as if he did not exist. See, he's looking all kind of invisible right there. Cat. Brucey. Did I lose my spot? For over a month after that day, not a single soul uttered a single word to Edgar. Not a hello, not a goodbye, or even a disapproving grunt. Edgar rather preferred it that way. He fed himself at night and listened intently to the teacher during the day. Not only did he learn what 31 times 17 was, but many other multiplication problems as well. He learned how to read and write and excelled at his art class. He could answer any question the teacher asked, although she would never call on him when he raised his hand. No mind, thought Edgar. At least no one is saying nasty things to me. That's very sad. One night, Edgar strolled home at his own lonely pace. The moon was already out and the town clock struck 10 o'clock. Edgar had wanted to taste his newfound freedom. Since becoming invisible, he could go and do just about anything he wanted to do. He climbed the Main Street Park statue of Jeremiah Wainwright, the town hero. Nobody saw him. Apple juice break. Flip up my collar. Nobody ever saw him. Edgar was convinced that he was invisible. There could be no other explanation. But just when he passed the soda shop, he heard a slight sound. It sounded like his name. Edgar stopped in his tracks. It sounded so real, but he eventually brushed it off as being the wind. Edgar. There it was again. Edgar stopped and listened. Maybe he had become visible again. Maybe the mean kids at school were coming after him, or the twins, or Mr. and Mrs. Frunk. He heard footsteps. Edgar ran as fast as his little legs would carry him. He ran through the park, over the bridge, and into the community garden. The footsteps, they continued, getting faster and faster on his trail. They were gaining on him, and he could hear his name being called over and over again. He's trying to run away. Finally, when his little lungs felt as if they could explode, mysterious hands grabbed him from behind. These were the first hands to touch him in over a month. Their touch had sent a tingle through Edgar's spine. Not like when the Frunks had touched him, though. Their hands were cold and clammy. These hands were warm and gentle. See? Nice hands. Edgar swung around to see his captor and suddenly realized it was his mother, his real mother. His eyes filled with tears, and he grabbed onto his mother's waist. He felt his body get warm as his mother held him as close as she could. A rosy shine came over Edgar's cheek.